Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev, what's going to be different? Well, before we get to my opinion, I want to share Charles' opinion. And I have disclosed to you guys that I made a deal with Gabriel Checo before Charles fought Benny DeRouche. And the deal was, if Charles wins, I must accept his greatness. And when I speak about him, I must speak in the tone of understanding his greatness. I assure you I do. There's just a lot of times with Charles where there's a comparison to be made. And I will fully admit he has overperformed my expectations. But I've never come out and put Charles down. I mean, he's been in there opposite Tony Ferg. He's been in there opposite UFC Gaethje. He's been in there opposite Islam Makhachev. He's been there opposite Benny DeRouche. I mean, in all fairness, I'm making a comparison. So there is a very meaningful question, though. Anytime you have a rematch, and everybody's got to answer it. Charles, Islam, Dana White, they're all going to be asked it, and they must have an answer. Whatever it is, there's no wrong answer other than, like you can't go silent. The question is simply, what's going to be different this time? Right? And imagine them asking Dana, hey, Dana, why'd you book this match? There was nothing about the first fight that, historically speaking, speaks rematch. And I do mean nothing. It was not competitive anywhere. It wouldn't matter if somebody's getting touched up on their feet and the big takedown comes and then the fight gets resolved. So next time, if he can just keep it on his feet, like, no, there's nothing about that match that was competitive. And as far as hype and a storyline and something to go in with it, right? As far as the bureaucracy and the business comes first. And I understand all of those things. But that is private. Whatever those numbers did are private and we don't actually know. And it was reported to us last year that the biggest fight of the year, this was at a certain point, but it was around summertime, halfway through the year, the biggest fight of the year was Gaethje versus Oliveira in terms of pay-per-view sales. And that is this was prior to Colby versus Masvidal, which I think did very, very well. But it was after the heavyweights. This was after Ciryl and Francis, which had the single greatest storyline in UFC heavyweight history. So it's a big deal that they had that number. Whether they ended the year with it or not, it's a big deal that they had that. And I only bring it to you because perhaps Charles is a much bigger star and draw than we know. Like, we wouldn't actually be able to know that. Perhaps somebody in that part of the world asked specifically for that match. Or perhaps Charles, and Charles just did an interview, perhaps Charles, who's built a relationship with the organization, went and shared some level of reason for that performance or lack thereof and gained sympathy, got somebody to believe him. He wouldn't be the first to have done that. I'm just sharing with you, like, Charles has come out and said, man, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. I'm not doing trash talk. I'm not doing the media. I'm not doing the hype. I got distracted on that fight, and it wasn't me by the time we got in there. I'm going to fix it this time. And I would have no reason to not believe him because it didn't look like him. And I always have chalked that up to just how great Islam is. And then Islam did still look great against Volk, but he looked more human. Can we agree on that? That's a term you guys use. I stole that from you. He looked human. So, one thing about Charles that I wish I had. Is that a way to compliment a guy? So much that I wish I could take this superpower from him. I really do like his mental approach. He's a bit inconsistent. Guys that are inconsistent are oftentimes mentally, there's something that can get to them. But I see it the other way for Charles. Even if that was true early in his career, we could debate that or not debate that. But I'm sharing with you, when he made his run, and he is still on it, he's the number one contender. He's still on the run. It's been amazing what he's overcome. Look at what he had to overcome to fight Justin Gaethje. They took his belt away. He lost a world championship without ever being punched. He lost a world championship without being knocked out, submitted TKO. He lost a world championship without a judge even voting against him. Lost a world championship on a scale But that is a massive domino effect. When you sit around and you dream of being a fighter, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a fighter. I'm going to reach a certain level of success. When that flame dies down like they all do, I will have enough money. That will be what I've done with my life. I will go the rest of my life because I was a fighter. That's a dream, and it's a pipe dream, and it's rare, but it does happen. It's not impossible. It happens all the time. It happens to multiple people every single year. Multiple lots. But if you have that dream, there's only one way to achieve it. It's not a world championship. It's not an undefeated record. It's not a Mike Tyson-like knockout, and it's not having good clips on the microphone. It's to have participation points, which is only given exclusive. 4 people have ever gotten participation that weren't champions. You're looking at one of us. I know this very well. Champions, when they defend, not the night they win. A champion who brings the belt back to another event gets participation. It's a gift. It's given to him. He is given a piece of the business. It's an extremely generous thing. But when Charles lost the belt, that goes away. See, that's the point that I'm trying to make. So Charles was a pride fighter. He's a proud champion. Loses his championship, which is a completely debatable issue. I'm the only one that wanted to debate it. I debated over and over and over, hoping Charles and or his team would contact me. There was a way to arbitrate that entire discussion, but participation now goes away. And this is a guy from the favela that takes care of a lot of people. Got a lot of people that have come to him. I know he's happy to do it. In America, we call those leeches. But either way, that check gets pulled in a lot of directions, particularly when you've already made promises. Some of them folks you made promises to are dangerous people, and they're not going to understand when you come back and say the number's not what I thought the number was because I misscaled by half a pound. That's not the way that works after you said I will bring you X amount. Now, I'm going down a completely different road. I'm just sharing for you. When I talk about a domino effect, and Charles went out there and arguably put on his absolute best performance. Arguably. The Charles Oliveira that fought Justin Gaethje is not only the best Charles Oliveira I've ever seen, he's not only arguably one of the best lightweights. And the only reason I got to say this, you got King Khabib there. I can't quite put him in front of Khabib. That is a top 10 performance. That is a top 10 fighter that's ever done the sport. That I'm very confident in telling you. That guy, that Charles, right? It's much like the Duplessis that just fought Whitaker. That Duplessis, there ain't 5 guys in history of that division that could beat him. That Charles, there's not 10 guys in the history of the sport that could beat him. And I bring this to think about what he was up against. Then he goes in against Benny DeRouche. Now, this is nothing short of a passing of the torch. Benny DeRouche should have been fighting for the championship. I believe he had been on an 8-fight win streak. I lose track he won so many. I know it was 7, but I think it was 8, and if he got over on Charles, that was 9. He was a big favorite at DraftKings. It was less than 3-1, but it was over 2.5. Top of my head. And Charles wins the entire fight and finishes him. Knowing that this is the time. They're taking it all from me tonight. Tonight, I have been brought in to do for Benny DeRouche what Tony Ferguson got brought in to do for me. He knows that. And he put on arguably as good of a performance as he did against Gaethje. I mean, I just bring that to you because this guy is stone cold solid. I don't see discrepancies. I don't see mental weaknesses. And now he's saying that it wasn't him because there was some trash talk. Look, I don't doubt it. And if he's been able to identify it, good for him. If he truly has identified it and he's telling you that takes all its power away and he could change the performance, at least from a mental approach. And it does make me a little bit more interested. But now I wonder, which Charles do I believe? Do I believe the Charles that says a new Charles and improved Charles is going to show up, that learned from the first one, is going to get everything right? Like, that sounds pretty good to me. Not to mention, you got a fear of a guy. It's like a 4-minute mile. But then he saw that Islam's human. He saw Islam losing rounds against Volkanovski. He's a judge that thinks Islam lost the entire fight against Volkanovski. Like, that is going to give you a little bit of pep in your step. But is that the guy that I believe? Or do I trust the Charles who 3 different times stated he's not even going to show up for the fight? I don't think I'm breaking my deal with Gabriel Checo. I think that I'm being fair. And I don't put Charles down. I'm making a comparison. And when you compare him to Islam, in all fairness, it's tough.